Welcome, everyone. We are getting ready to get started. We're going to give it a couple minutes and let people get in. Everyone is so timely. Congratulations, everybody, for being right on time. Love to see that. Look at that. It's amazing. We'll give it about 60 more seconds before we get started, just to allow people to find the link and get here. I am always one of those people who is not right in the door as we start, because I'd be looking for the link. As you come in, if you want to drop your name and what organization you're with or where you're from in the chat, that would be great. Let others see who's here. Yes, how do I do that? Karen, how do I enable chat for everyone?
It should be in your settings on the sidebar.
You mean if I open participants? I don't see how to do that. Here we go. Attendees. There we go. Okay, chat is enabled. So drop your name and where you're from, or what organization you're with in the chat so that everybody can kind of see who's here. Well, there might be people from a neighboring town or a neighboring state. Love to be able to connect in that way. All right, great. With that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will get started. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. This is our final webinar of 2022. We all made it through the year, knock wood. Congratulations, only 2 weeks to go, but we're in the final stretch. Thank you all for being here. We're going to talk a little bit today about some of the trends that we saw in 2022 for food recovery, and think about how those might impact your thinking about 2023, and then talk a little bit about thinking about planning for your next year of growth. So in trends in 2022, I think one of the ones that we all are feeling really heavily is inflation, and grocery costs have skyrocketed this year. Inflation has hit everybody really hard in the pocketbook, particularly when it comes to grocery shopping. One of the things that's really interesting about this chart is if you look at the cost of food at home has gone up dramatically more than food away from home. So, what that means is that people who are struggling to put food on the table regularly are going to be even more impacted right now. So inflation is hitting especially people on fixed incomes really hard, as those checks are just not going as far as they used to, meaning food insecurity is on the rise in 2022, and that I think we will see continue into 2023. There doesn't seem to be any sign of that giving up or letting up too much. Something we've also noticed, and I suspect if you're on this call and you're doing food rescue, you might have felt this too, is that there's been some weird supply chain disruption that has impacted food rescues. What we've seen across our network, and we've heard anecdotally from others, is that supply chain disruption means that donation sizes, especially at retail, are a little bit smaller. Whether stores are getting more efficient with their ordering, or they are simply just not able to have as much extra on hand, the donation size for retailers has declined. The number of rescues hasn't gone down. We've seen that actually increase across our footprint and in food rescue in general, but the donation size is getting smaller. And a lot of that is from that supply chain disruption. It has also affected certain items more than others. So meat has been something that has been in shorter supply this year than in previous times. This, of course, is going to impact your end recipients as well and what you're able to deliver. On the good note, in 2022, we've seen a not necessarily an uptick in volunteering, but a continuation of the high levels that started during the pandemic. It is no secret that during the pandemic, Americans actually turned out in record number to volunteer, recognizing that in those unprecedented times, they wanted to be part of helping their neighbors. That number has not gone down dramatically. We've seen, as you see, 95% of people say that they will continue that high level of involvement after the pandemic. And the estimation of how important volunteering is to individuals in their community has gone up significantly. So we're now seeing 73% of people saying volunteering is even more important after the pandemic. That is really good news for food rescue, as we can count on continued high engagement of volunteers into 2023. More good news for food recovery is that one of the top causes for volunteering is hunger and homelessness. So, again, I think coming out of the pandemic and recognizing how hard that hit a lot of families that were out of work or that were saw their hours reduced, hunger and homelessness spiked. And we know that this is an ongoing problem. This is where Americans want to volunteer their time. Note that environment and conservation is about half of that. That doesn't mean you should never talk about the environmental impact of food recovery. That is still really critical. And there is a core of volunteers who are very committed to the environmental impact that food recovery has. But the message that is going to resonate most broadly with the most volunteers and the most supporters across the board is going to be the impact that food recovery can have on hunger and homelessness. We also saw a trend in 2022 towards a sort of a broader, not just awareness of food recovery, but an embracing of food recovery as a solution. And so there was a lot of legislation and legal support for food recovery that started before 22, but really came to fruition in 2022. I saw a handful of folks on here from California. California's SB 1383 went into effect January 1st. It requires commercial businesses to donate food. Starting in 2022, it was tier 1. In 2024, tier 2 will be on the hook for donating as well. And by 2025, California is requiring that 20% of edible food that would have been disposed of in the garbage is actually donated for human consumption. New York State also had a law go into effect on January 1st, 2022. Theirs is a little bit less toothy. The California law has enforcement mechanisms built into it, and New York, it really remains to be seen how much they enforce that and require businesses to donate or face consequences. But this is really, really huge. There are 2 of the biggest states in the country have passed food recovery laws. This is going to continue to happen. I think we're going to see more states and more locations, whether it's municipalities or cities, also pass food recovery or food waste bans coming up in the next couple of years. So a lot of donors are seeing this happen and are recognizing that this is coming down the pike. And so you're going to see national chains, for example, wanting to get their ducks in a row to make sure that they are maximizing their food recovery because they don't want to be caught short when this, when the next state goes or the next state goes. A lot of times these trends go, sort of fall like dominoes. Remains to be seen whether that will happen, but I think we can, folks are bracing for it. The Food Donation Improvement Act was also put forward in 2022. I don't think it's going to make it out of committee and get voted on this year, but I think it will be reintroduced in 2023. It was first introduced in 2021, and I think it will continue to be on the docket until it's passed. And the momentum behind it is growing. There was a lot of organizations, including a couple national organizations, that put their weight behind supporting this act last year. This would beef up the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act and be really helpful to businesses that want to donate and to organizations that want to recover food. So this is, again, just another example of the trend in legislation to provide that legal framework and support for food recovery. In 2023, the Farm Bill is up for renewal. That will happen this spring. For the first time ever, the words, food waste apply in the Farm Bill, the words food waste appear in the Farm Bill. There's a long way to go. That could be removed. We'll see what happens, but there's a lot of opportunity for advocacy on food recovery organizations' part to make sure that the 2023 Farm Bill provides as much framework and support as possible for food recovery. This is another critical step in kind of bringing food recovery to the mainstream and having the federal government understand that supporting food recovery should be a critical piece of their efforts in ending hunger. Sort of on the flip side, with the White House Conference on Hunger, Health, and Nutrition this fall, there was no conversation about food waste that wasn't interjected from sort of outside. So there's still a lot of work to be done there to raise awareness and to make sure that we have support at the top levels of government for food recovery. I will say there are 2 areas that came out of the White House conference that are, I think, tailor-made for food recovery. One is to ensure policies and programs reduce disparities in hunger. We know that food recovery provides an opportunity to increase access and to distribute more food to more places. So we can help reduce disparities in hunger by increasing access. And I think that is a case to be made. And then the second one here is adopt innovative approaches to value creation. When we're talking to funders or to elected officials about food recovery, you want to keep that in mind, that innovative approaches to value creation is something that has been earmarked by the White House as an important way to approach hunger, health, and nutrition. Food recovery is innovative. Food recovery helps address 2 problems, food waste and hunger, but it also creates access and provides nutrition security, or a path to nutrition security. So, think about these trends and how you're talking about your programs and how you're talking about the value that food recovery brings to your community. And then finally, upcycled foods. Upcycled foods, if you probably have seen, are now everywhere. There are products on, every shelf of the grocery store that are upcycled. And what upcycled means, for those of you that don't know, it's taking ingredients that otherwise would not have gone for human consumption and turning those into a product for sale and for human consumption. So an example would be using pulp from juice to make crackers, or using skins from vegetable peelings to make broth. So there's a lot of products out on the market right now that are created from upcycled product. Whey is another one. There's a lot of whey produced when you make yogurt. And so it's actually really bad for the environment, by the way. So there's a number of organizations that are, or businesses that are trying to recover whey and turn them into products that can be sold and, bring a profit to an organization, keep that whey out of the waste stream, and actually make a product that is really good for people. And of course, the popularity of upcycled foods has grown with the prevalence of them. And so, there's some general discrepancies, but what you see is that there is a market. There are people who are looking for upcycled products, that are purchasing things specifically because they're upcycled. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but this provides a great opportunity for a food recovery organization to potentially partner with local businesses to take surplus food that you might have difficulty placing somewhere and upcycle that into a product that they can sell that then can financially support your organization. So this is a really exciting trend. It kind of fits in with the ethos of food recovery, but also provides some really great opportunities for food recovery organizations. So when we take a look at 2022, when we take a look at 2022, there's a lot of exciting things happening out in the world that are help position food recovery really strongly in 2023. So as you're thinking about planning for the coming year and your growth for the coming year, I'm going to talk a little bit about, number one, just generally how to kind of target your growth for the year, but also then how to take those trends we saw in 2022 and take advantage of those, leverage those to help you grow even more than you would have if you're sort of just in your own tunnel vision. So growth minded. So the need is there, right? We saw that. There is a uptick in hunger thanks to the increase in inflation. Where are there opportunities? Well, there's opportunities as upcycling, as recovering food, as ending food waste become more mainstream and more desirable. These are providing opportunities for you to recover more food. It gives you a more fertile ground to pitch to donors, food donors. It gives you a more fertile ground to pitch to financial donors as well. And it gives you some language to use that maybe, would not have otherwise been familiar to folks a couple of years ago, but now they're starting to hear these trends and see them as opportunities. But also set your expectations. There's more businesses interested in donating, as we sort of just talked about, but also rescues may be a little bit smaller. So if you want to recover the same amount of food that you did this year, it may mean more rescues. So in terms of calculating what your needs are going to be for next year, you might need more volunteers and more donors to recover the same amount of food and provide the same amount of service. Of course, the flip side of that is if you want to grow, you're going to need even more than that. So set your targets for next year with kind of these things in mind. But tap into those invested community members and groups. We've seen that high level of engagement in people wanting to volunteer. Target your volunteer recruitment and tap into that sentiment. Get those people in the door to help you achieve your mission. The more buzz there is, not only the more volunteers you have, but also the more support you have in the community. If your local grocery store is hearing from their customers that they volunteer for you or they support you and they want that grocery store to donate, there's going to be that sort of push from below for those donors to participate. So take advantage of that enthusiasm by your volunteers. Also, it's so easy in food recovery. I know we get in the weeds and it is so busy, so all consuming, trying to keep up with operations on a day-to-day business. Believe me, I know. But think big picture too. Advocate with lawmakers. Let them know that you support the expansion of the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act. Let them know that you want to see the Farm Bill, including language about date labeling and reducing food waste and connecting food waste to hunger. Let them know that you support these things so that they can help support you. Your local representatives, your senators, your congressmen, et cetera, will be really supportive. This is something that everybody can get behind. It is not a partisan issue by and large. We were advocating in the halls of Congress this summer for the Food Donation Improvement Act, and Republican and Democrat alike were really supportive. So go reach out to your lawmakers, let them know what you're doing, and ask them for their support by advocating in the Farm Bill and passing the Food Donation Improvement Act. And then, of course, make sure that your language is placing your operations in the center of what's trending. If the White House wants innovative solutions, talk about how innovative food recovery is. Talk about the fact that it brings, it answers two problems, both food waste and the climate impact from food waste and hunger. Talk about the fact that, if you do 100 rescues and have 100 volunteers doing rescues, that's 100 of their constituents that are behind this. So make sure that you are updating how you talk about your programs based on what is trending out in the universe, the world. And of course, just very similar, food waste initiatives are becoming trendy. There's a lot of investment in them. Take advantage of that. Make sure that you are out there talking to financial donors, food donors, volunteers about the fact that your organizations are really on the leading edge of how we are solving, two really critical problems. Then, of course, once you've sort of identified these big goals, you want to identify your stakeholders, make sure that your team is on board with the goals and that you have looped in everybody that you need to make these goals happen. Decide what your metrics are. How are you going to measure your progress? Pounds of food or meals delivered is a great one, but maybe you're not going to be able to grow in pounds of food this year. Maybe it's new donors or new distribution points or number of volunteers. There's a lot of different ways to grow. Where is it that you need to grow and want to grow? And how are you going to be measuring that success? Define that up front in January. That's really important for a couple of reasons. First, you can establish milestones. You want to break down your timeline to be able to follow those metrics throughout the year and make sure that you're on track. If you want 100 new nonprofit partners to distribute food to by the end of the year, and you're at 0 come July, you're a little behind and you might need to either reevaluate your metrics or move really fast. So it's a great way to kind of keep track of how you're doing. I do want to add that if you get to July and it turns out that you were way off base in your assumptions about how the year was going to go, it's okay to readjust your goals. Instead of continuing to try for the rest of the year to reach what has now been established as a very unlikely or impossible goal, reevaluate, reset, and start aiming for that new goal. Redefine success. You're allowed to do that. That's actually really encouraged. You don't need to end up failing if you realize that things aren't going the way you thought they would go. So milestones and metrics can really help you do that so you can ensure that you have a successful year. So tracking progress against expectations, Also, make sure that you're growing proportionally. This is, this is a trap that we have fallen into in Pittsburgh a couple of times, where our volunteers grew way out of proportion to our donors and our nonprofit partners. And we had volunteers get really frustrated that there weren't volunteer opportunities, or we've grown so quickly with donors, nonprofits, and volunteers that our staff were really killing themselves to make the donuts, so to speak, to get things done. So you don't want to do that either. Make sure that you set those goals to grow everything proportionally. And then create yourself that roadmap. What are those key KPIs that you are setting for the year that will demonstrate your progress? And then you can check in on those as you go. The other reason why it's really important to do this is sort of set your goals at the beginning, set a roadmap, determine your KPIs, and check in throughout the year. Is financial donors like to see measurable progress. So if you know that, let's say you've tapped out the donor market and you probably have as much growth in pounds as you're going to see, maybe you're only going to see a small growth in pounds. What are you going to do to demonstrate that you've continued to grow or continue to progress? Is it new volunteers? Is it new distribution points? What are you going to be able to show your funders? So you want to identify those growth opportunities, set up achievable metrics in the beginning of the year, and then be able to show funders throughout the year how you either met those goals or readjusted when circumstances changed. So an example of this would be, let's say in 2022, your missed rescue rate was 3.6%. And, not everybody tracks this. This is something that we track in Pittsburgh with Food Rescue Hero, but pick something that you track that maybe wasn't what you wanted it to be for the year, right? And then identify the trends and why that happened. So if we had a 3.6 missed rescue rate and we wanted it to be 1%, identify what's happening. Maybe we've had a difficulty engaging new volunteers, or we've had people sign up, but they haven't been activating, or maybe the gas prices are causing people not to volunteer. Determine your metrics. How are you going to measure that? So for example, if we have staff covering missed rescues, it might look like we didn't have missed rescues, but maybe we want to consider those in there because staff could have been doing something else and it would have been a missed rescue otherwise. Then plan, how are you going to address those trends and fix them? What is your plan for getting new volunteers, for activating existing volunteers, or for dealing with the fact that fuel costs might be impacting? Is it going to be shorter routes? Are you going to try to raise money for gas cards for your volunteers? What are you going to do to address that? And then, of course, measuring success is always critical in planning so that you can revise and edit your plan as you go along. And we're going to take questions in a second, but I just want to actually give a pitch for our January webinar, because we're going to talk about data and storytelling. And that's really important when you talk about measuring success. You want to be collecting whatever data you can, even if you don't have, an app or something that's really making data super easy. You've got data. You want to be collecting that and using that to tell your story, to make your operations better, to be able to show those funders, okay, we identified this issue. This is where we put our time and effort this year. This was the payoff. And so make sure that you're collecting that data and using it to evaluate success as you go. And oops, wrong way. And I will open it up to questions.
Yes, we did get a question from Jim asking if we would share the slide deck after the webinar is over. You will all receive an email early next week with the recording to the webinar. So if you missed anything or need to go back and take some notes, don't worry, we'll be sending that to you guys hopefully on Monday. And we'll also include a link to Jen's calendar if you want to schedule a quick follow-up with her. If you have more questions and want to just have 30 minutes to pick her brain, we'll send that link as well in that email.
Can I ask a favor of folks? If you see, I don't know how that looks, but if you see just like 1 30-minute slot, meaning I'm booked all on the other side and the bottom of that, maybe look for one that it has a little bit more gap around it. I have to get better about giving myself those buffer times, but I end up with back-to-back 30 minutes and inevitably somebody at the tail end gets bumped because things go over. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. All right, other questions?
Feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A. And if there aren't any questions, feel free to email Jen as well if you think of something afterwards, and we'll be happy to answer that for you.
Yeah, I just want to say to everybody that's here on this webinar, that's been to any of our webinars in the past this year, even if you're new the first time, just thank you everybody for continuing to engage and to make the food rescue community just really vibrant and robust. It's so exciting to see the growth of interest in food rescue, both in terms of new organizations and just new people coming to it. So I wish everybody a very happy and healthy new year. All right. If there are no questions, then I will say adieu and happy, healthy new year to everybody. Bye.
Thanks for joining, everyone.